Are you stuck on a female ancestor who seems to have vanished from the records? What if the key to finding her is not in the birth certificate, but in her work and her role in the community? Those roles in the community that your ancestor played actually could have created records that you can use to open up new avenues of research to grow your family tree. Hey there, if we haven't met before, I'm Lisa with Are You My Cousin? And this YouTube channel is designed to help you find your ancestors, grow your family tree, but not be overwhelmed in the process. So if it sounds like a cup of tea, you're in the right place. So why is understanding and knowing the community roles important when it comes to researching our ancestors? Now, as I'm recording this video, we are actually coming up on Mother's Day. So I thought this was a great time to talk about women in our family tree once again, and really talk about what kind of roles they played, not just in the family, but within their community, and how that can help us as researchers find the women in our family tree and tell their stories more fully. So let's take a step back. From a genealogy research standpoint, why is it important to pursue what roles the women in our family tree may have played in their communities? Understanding that role she played actually can help you break through genealogy brick walls, because community roles may have created records that you can actually pursue. Was she part of a club? Was she part of a church or a faith group that did charity work? All of these things could have created records that we can potentially look at as genealogy researchers. Did she have a professional role in the community? Women's community work can actually create pathways of research when maybe a marriage record is missing or her vital records might be missing. If she was a professional, maybe she had a job and she was a career woman, then those professional records may also provide vital information about her early life, perhaps her birth date, perhaps a maiden name, which we are all oftentimes desperately searching for, right? So understanding the role in the community, or maybe say the role outside of her home, is going to be important for your genealogy research and worth the search. Now, another reason that we want to really understand the role in the community that our ancestor may have played is that it allows us as descendants, it allows us as the family historians to tell a richer narrative about her life. When you know an ancestor's occupation, it brings a dimension to that family narrative. It brings a depth to the storytelling. It allows us to tell a richer story, a richer narrative. I recently had a conversation with my daughter about family history and asked her what was it about family history that would spark her attention. In other words, what would get her interested in learning more about her ancestors? To be honest, she didn't miss a beat, and she immediately said, "Mom, it's the stories." And she had a really good point. The dates, when I would say, "Oh, we have so, and here's the birth, marriage, and death date, and they lived here, etc." She said, "That's just really dry. I have no connection with that." She said, "But when I learned that my great-grandmother worked in the school cafeteria and went on to work her career in school dietetics," she said, "that caught my attention. That gave her a perspective and sparked her curiosity when it came to learning more about one of her ancestors." And I think that's a really good point. I think we miss that sometimes as researchers. You and I love to get deep, deep into the records of a dusty courthouse. But to be honest, my adult kids, they don't want anything to do with that. So it's important for us as researchers to be able to tell a richer story and richer narrative for our female ancestors. Oftentimes we can discover professional skills that have actually passed through generations, as well as a job that a woman may have had outside of her home or in a non-traditional role may actually give us an insight into her personality or her interest and her skills. Now, understanding a woman's role in the community can also give us some alternative research strategies that we can use. Because when we hit that brick wall looking for that woman in the family tree, and you will if you haven't already, because when we hit that brick wall in traditional records for our genealogy research for the women in the family tree, we need to look outside of those traditional records, and that's where that community role comes into play, because those roles do create records on their own. Stick with me, because I'm going to be showing you some examples of that and how to find those roles in the community in just a few minutes. So let's shift gears and think about some of the jobs or the roles that a woman may have played outside of the home. One of the first ones that really came to mind when I was thinking through this video is that of the midwife. The practice of midwifery spans cultures and it spans generations literally around the world. The midwife in a community would have been a very respected woman, and oftentimes these skills and these occupations were passed down from generation to generation. As the profession of midwifery progressed, we started to see more organization around it, we actually can find them in a variety of types of records for that. So I'm going to actually turn my screen around. I'm going to share with you a few records that I have found documenting that on the lives of midwives, as well as how to determine, was your ancestor a midwife? Here we are over here at ancestry.com. I wanted to show you a midwife role that could be potentially useful for you if you are researching the midwives in your family tree or suspect you have a woman in your tree who was a midwife. This collection is actually for the UK. This is the midwife role. And if you come down here, I like to pop out the source description so I know exactly what it is I'm looking at. And in this case, consists of the role of the midwives in the United Kingdom for the years 1904 to 1959. Covers obviously a huge time span and is going to be helpful in looking at my ancestors. Now, so for instance, what you might see here in this directory, we have the woman's name, we have her address. That's incredibly helpful, isn't it? And we have the date she was enrolled, and we have her qualification in practice. So we have a little bit more information about her, and we can continue to work through. What I am not 100% sure here, and it would require me looking at it a little bit closer, is this her home address, or is this more likely where she practices? So that would be potentially something to look at. We can see here, this woman down here, Ivy, she works at the home farm in the Flintwell. She works at the home farm. So this seems to indicate perhaps a business location. Underneath, we have Miss Abbott working at the nurse's home on the Victoria Docks. So this is likely where she is practicing her midwifery. Now, another common role for women in the community would have been that of a teacher. It was not uncommon for the teacher to be a single woman, and then once she married, she likely would have given up her teaching career. And there were many women who were unmarried who built full careers out of the teaching profession. Now, it wasn't always easy to be a teacher, and even when they were a teacher for just a short period of time, we actually have the ability to find documentation on that. There are a number of places that we can find and locate information about our teaching ancestors, regardless if it was a very short teaching experience. We can look in things like yearbooks, alumni publications that will mention teachers' names. The census record, we don't want to forget the census record. The general population census record will indicate oftentimes someone's occupation. So if she was a teacher, that would be indicated. There were also, in some states, school census records that we can check out as well. So we do have options for finding out if an ancestor was a teacher and perhaps be able to track how long she is documented as a teacher. I'm going to turn the camera around and just take a quick peek at a few record collections that I found indicating information about some teaching ancestors. All right, so we're over here in the card catalog for Ancestry.com, and I wanted to show you how, if you were looking for records specific to teachers in Ancestry, you would actually do that here in the card catalog. So what I would do is come into the card catalog, and I actually put in teacher as my keyword. So I'm going to type in teacher and then hit search, as you can see. So I did that already, and you can see what I'm getting here. I'm getting Australian records, Hawaii newspaper records. Now, typically I like to actually narrow this down a little bit more because this is quite large here. It's 139 record collections, which I can actually scroll through, but if I want to make this specifically the US, since that's typically what I research, I can filter that out and find some of what they might have as far as teacher records. It doesn't look like they have a ton of things that I would actually probably use, but again, this would be a potentially a helpful way of narrowing down and finding teacher records. Now, another place to look and perhaps potentially find collections regarding teachers in the family would be Find My Past. They only have 8 sets here. So essentially you go into all record sets up here, type in teacher, but they do have a few records, and I don't ever want to overlook a site just because it has a few records, because as long as it has the one I need, it doesn't matter how many it has. And so again, a lot of these are going to be based for the UK or Australia or New Zealand. We have teacher indices, we have registered teachers for Queensland, but here's actually a record out of Chester County, Pennsylvania. So you never quite know what you might find, but this is always a good way to start and to check what each of the major databases has to see what you could potentially make use of in your own research. Now, additional community roles that your female ancestor may have had would have been a seamstress or a dressmaker. Now, seamstresses and dressmakers would have likely been based from home, and we can see these listed out in the census record as well. Being a seamstress or doing piecework would have been very common among the working class immigrant ancestors who may have come over. It was a way for them to bring in a little extra income. Now, a very skilled dressmaker may have hired and trained other women, and we might find evidence of her skill level and her services offered in, say, a newspaper ad. Perhaps a woman in your family tree was a shopkeeper or a merchant. Now, most shops during much of the time periods that we tend to research would have been likely men. But widows may have continued that business after a husband passed away. Additionally, some women had their own shops. It was a way to earn a little extra income to help support the family. And the type of shop that a female ancestor might have run would have been, say, a dry goods store or a small grocery store. I mentioned city directories as a way to find some of the shopkeepers and women who were working outside the home. And so I wanted to show you an example of that. This is actually the South Haven, Casco, and Covert, Michigan directory, city directories for 1898 to 1900. So it's 3 small towns that are in one city directory. And I wanted to show you this front page here because it's going to help you get an idea of what you can potentially find in a city directory when it comes to women and shopkeepers. So I always look here at the front matter. So this is the front page, and it tells us who is going to be included, what is actually going to be in this particular directory. So it tells us about the illustrated sketches, but it also tells us there's going to be here an alphabetical list of male residents over 17 years of age, all widows, heads of households. So if a woman is the head of a household, she'll be here, and ladies following any line of business in said townships. So a woman, regardless if she's a widow or married woman, if she has a business in one of these townships, she will have appear in the city directory. Here's an example of a woman who is single and she is a milliner. So she has her own business, Miss Harriet Miller. She is a milliner and she runs her shop at the corner of Center and Huron Streets. And again, here we have another single woman, Miss Ada Mitchell, who is a milliner as well, and it gives her address. So I find that very helpful, very interesting to find that women who are running their own businesses are listed out here as well. Now, another role in the community the woman may have played could have been that of a boarding house keeper. Oftentimes, boarding house operators were actually women or widows, and being a boarding house keeper was a way for them to maintain a level of respectability, but also create that income for themselves. Now, we can actually see evidence of this on the census records to see if your ancestor was a boarding house keeper. So let's pop into the census record and take a look at a boarding house keeper in that census record and get an idea of a little bit about her story. I wanted to hop over here to the 1940 census record. This is the U.S. census record. It is for Boise City, Idaho. And I wanted just to show you a boarding house keeper here and what we find. So this is the story of Hazel Marwell. She's here. She is the head of the household. And if we come all the way to her occupation, we find out that she is a boarding house keeper and she is in the lodging industry. So I think that's a really helpful and interesting piece of the puzzle that we see. This is her home, but also obviously her occupation. She's trying to bring money in. And if we look at her household, what we see is she is the head of the household. She's the head of the household here. She has her son-in-law and daughter living with her. And then she has roomers. Sometimes you'll see these as lodges. As lodgers, but in this case, they called them a roomer. So she has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So she's got 5 lodgers staying with her. Now, it is a little bit interesting with Hazel. She is the head of the household. She is the one providing the information. And interestingly enough, she's 49 years old. It states that she's married, but it has a line through it. So I'm not 100% sure, is she truly married or not? Maybe she's actually widowed. But regardless, there is not her husband, if indeed she's still married, is not in the home. She is born in Idaho, and she is running her home as a boarding house to support herself and the rest of her family as well. So if your research into the women in your family tree is stuck, or you're trying to get the rest of the family interested in the family stories, then start exploring the role of that woman in her community. You may be surprised at what you find. Now, if you would like to learn more about researching the women in your family tree, watch this video on your screen now. 26 places you have not looked for your female ancestor.